Well, the U.S. and its NATO allies appear to be no closer to resolving tensions with Russia over a military buildup at the Ukrainian border. High-stakes talks in Europe this week ended in an impasse. NATO has rejected several of Russia's demands, including a promise that Ukraine never be allowed to join the alliance. Moscow hasn't made any moves to pull back its troops from the border, and the White House is warning that the threat of a military invasion remains high.
Our position is quite straightforward. If the Russian military moves across the Ukrainian frontier to seize territory, we believe that that is the further invasion of Ukraine, and it will trigger a response from the United States and the international community.
So let's head on over to Mary Ilyushina. She is following this story for us from Moscow. Mary, first we want to start with actually some breaking news out of Ukraine this morning. Officials say there were a number of government websites that are down after a massive hacking attack. It's not clear who's responsible, but, you know, there are heightened tensions, obviously, between NATO, Moscow, Ukraine. Is there a possibility that Moscow could be behind this? I mean, we talk about warfare, but warfare doesn't have to be, you know, troops along the border. Cyber warfare is a thing as well.
Absolutely. The Ukrainian officials in the morning said they've been experiencing a massive cyber attack, just like you said. And the foreign ministry website actually for a while had a really menacing message. I'm going to read it. Be afraid and expect the worst in Ukrainian, Polish, and Russian languages. So the foreign media officials said that they don't exactly know who behind this attack. They are launched an investigation, and they're going to have their forensic experts look into it. But the foreign ministry spokesperson said that there's been a long history of Russian attacks against a Ukrainian cyber structure. So, you know, they're definitely pointing a finger at Russia, especially against the background of all the tensions that we're seeing. And Ukrainian ambassador to the United States told CBS actually this morning that, you know, this invasion that a lot of people are talking about might not necessarily start with tanks, might start with these kinds of attacks.
So these talks that were aimed at, you know, bringing the temperature down, almost from the get-go, it looked like it was going to be, you know, a pretty hard endeavor, because Russia stated very clearly that their kind of red line in the sand was about NATO expansion, that they wanted guarantees that Ukraine in particular would never become a member of NATO, but they also do not want to see NATO expanding into any of the other countries that were allies and continue, and in some cases continue to be allies of Russia, right? So now we're hearing that Russia is even threatening to send troops to Venezuela, to Cuba. I guess the question is, where do we go from here? That is clearly the red line in the sand, but is there still room for negotiation? Are there areas that can be negotiated that will help to bring the temperature down?
That's a really tough question, because Russian officials have been pretty direct in saying that they think the talks were unsuccessful and that the US and NATO did not respond in the way they would like to see them respond. But, you know, Russian representatives at the OSCE, where the talks happened last night, said that they still haven't given up hope in diplomacy and that they want to sort of speed it up. And they believe that there's a way to sort of negotiate. Now, what we're all waiting for, and I guess the last hope here, is that NATO will respond to Russian demands and Russian security guarantees in writing sometime next week. Russian officials have promised to look at this response and say what they think about it, and if they believe that there is any possibility or any point to proceed and negotiate further. So far, we don't know what the response is going to be and whether we should put a lot of hope into it, because some of the demands that Russia put forward, like NATO seizing a lot of its activity in what Russia considers its sphere of influence, as non-starters, and U.S. clearly said that, you know, they don't think that's ever possible. So it is very much up in the air.
So, you know, Moscow, the thing about it is Moscow has sort of delivered these mixed messages. They keep, you know, they have this troop buildup happening, but then at the same time, they go, no, we don't have any interest in invading Ukraine, and pay no attention to what's happening along the border. And then they warn of, like, catastrophic consequences as well. So I guess my question has to do with Russia and the benefits and costs of actually invading Ukraine. The Ukrainian military is not what it was when they invaded Crimea and took it over. The clock is ticking in many ways, I would think, for Putin. You can't just keep troops out there in the middle of winter forever. At some point, winter will turn into spring and the ground will thaw. It's difficult to get through sort of this muddy areas. What are what's the cost benefit analysis that could be taking place in Russia when it comes to invading Ukraine?
Well, the costs are enormous because Russia, according to U.S. intelligence officials, is planning or considering an attack involving around 175,000 troops, which is a big number, but still would not be enough to fully invade Ukraine. So they will have to bring a lot more troops, and that's obviously a lot of resources. And the weather conditions are now very unclear because there's already some thaw going on, and that would, require a lot of military resources and a lot of funding and a lot of financing. And obviously, we got to think about Russian population. Do they want a war? They not necessarily would like one. There were multiple polls saying that, a lot of Russians consider that war might be possible, but obviously I don't think we're in that stage in the world where Russian mothers are prepared to send their children to go fight Ukraine, and they don't see the point in doing that. And of course, there's going to be humongous backlash internationally. We are talking new sanctions. We're talking personal sanctions against Vladimir Putin and Russian officials, which, essentially would mean that they would not be able to travel inside Russia. And that's a very, very big step for foreign officials to take. And, as we know, U.S. is considering this package of sanctions to impose on Russia if it invades Ukraine. So the costs are really, really big. And the benefits are quite questionable because we all obviously know that Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, and there was a lot of historical explanations, historical background that could sort of sell this idea to Russians. But with Ukraine itself, that's a much harder sell. So the benefits of that are very unclear.
Mary, thank you so much for giving us a little clarity in a situation that, as you say, is still quite unclear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.